thank you. Thank you all for being here today. What a joyous, joyous time. I can't see any faces, but I recognize a lot of you. And sadly, Pat couldn't be here today. Her boss wouldn't give her off work. Hey, somebody had to stay home and answer the phone and take registration. But if you know Pat, she would wake up every morning and always feel like she was behind schedule. She'd sit up and she goes, oh my gosh, I'm late. And even to this day, she feels the same way. But again, she sends her love. She thanks all of you for being here as well as we do. Anyway, Pat stands at the heart of the Barnes Studio of Art. One way or another, all of you have had some connection with Pat. I've had a close connection with her since I was born. For the most part, it's been good. I did send a card to her one year saying, you've been just like a mother to me. That didn't make her very happy, but we laugh about it now, as we laugh about a lot of things. Pat has touched so many of our lives, and I think it's evident about what's going on here today. She truly is the art spirit, and I think you'll see in the film how Bill Horn captured all of that, as well as in the book. In fact, when people say, why is it so important? You know, the legacy of the barn. But we know because of all the people that she's impacted or the barn has impacted, and that she has been really community-based, that we feel it's so important to keep it going. So things like this fundraiser and the book are evident of ways that we are going to keep the barn going. In fact, just last week, there was a message from somebody, a girl that studied there when she was 7, over 30 years ago. And she left, we have not heard from her in all that time, but she left a message for Pat, and she said, I wanted you to know that as an artist and an art teacher, that the impact that you have had on my life still resonates with me today. And that is really a beautiful thing. Many of you may have some similar stories. My daughter Alicia will be talking to you about that at the end to talk about, we'd like to hear those stories. Anyway, at the barn, we have a great group of teachers who have studied with Pat. For the most part, all of them have studied with Pat and now are teaching those students. I think if you've been in the studio lately and were there in your younger years, we work very hard to keep things going the way that she set it out. Anyway, I just wanted to focus in on Pat today, the legacy that she has and continues to have. This book was something that started with Mike Cagno. I know you're out there somewheres. He fell in love with these pochades. If you don't know what it means, you'll have to look it up, Pat would say. And he started out collecting these pochades that Pat had done and made this book. And when we saw it, we said, wow, this is great, but we want to do more. We want to tell more. So what we did is we launched writing this book, and in less than a year, we pulled it off, but it wasn't without some effort with that. Anyway, it only took us a year to pull the book together. We're very proud of it. And I want to thank a few people for the effort of making this day possible. First, thanks to Lauren Van Ebden for allowing us, for hosting the Levoy for us today. Thank you. It's been a great experience so far. And all the staff has been so wonderful and helpful. Also, Gay Taylor, wherever you are, raise your hand. Gay Taylor is our historian, our archivist, our curator. She does a lot for the barn on the barn board, but she was basically the project manager, her and Bill Horn, in making this book possible. Sterling Brown did a beautiful job writing, and if you hear in the art spirit this very lovely voice, that's the voice of Sterling Brown. Also, we want to thank the Wildflower Vegan Cafe for partnering with us in the little mini reception that we had upstairs. It takes a village, really, to run the barn. We have an army of volunteers. A lot of the alumni are invested in finding ways of giving back, and we're so appreciative. We don't have any plans of stopping anytime soon. Events like this really help us to keep it going. Also, I want to thank Bill Horn. Where are you, Bill? Okay. Bill Horn, magic. He really took on, first it was, oh, can you take a few pictures of some paintings for this book? Which launched into, I don't know how many we ended up with. Come on out here, Bill. Come on, don't be shy. Bill is really a great advocate of the community, of the barn, he's integral to the art community and other things that keeping the downtown Millville district alive. So we thank Bill for everything he's done and his big part that he played in making this book possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank Carol and Gay for including us in this project, the book. When they first approached us about doing it, we were in the middle of a lot of things. And I'm thinking, can we do this justice? Can we do it right? And I talked to my team and they said, absolutely got to do the book. And it was worth it. I love the way the book came out. I think once you take a look at it, you'll agree. So one thing I have here, the city of Millville has a proclamation for today. If you look at this thing, it's a mile long because it's listing just the highlights of Pat's career. So I'm going to do you all a favor and not read this because most of you already know why Pat deserves this proclamation. And if you don't, read the book. It's in the book. So I just want to give this to you before we go any farther.
Aww, thank you.
So we have a beautiful proclamation from the city. Thank you.
Right, the song and dance routine starts
Okay.
shortly. Okay. All right, I'm good, so it's all yours.
Well, I don't have much more to say. It's always tough to follow a Witt. I've learned that. So the only thing I want to say is that we have two films today. We were asked to provide two films for today. They're both short. The first is the Palace of Depression film that we did a few months ago. We finished. It's a 12-minute art piece that we're very proud of. And then that'll be followed by our documentary on Pat Witt and the Barn Institute of Art called The Art Spirit. So enjoy the films, enjoy the book, and someone will come out to talk to you when it's over. Thank you.
Some people possess a palace of the mind, a place where cherished dreams rule, which they're willing to share. Because what good is a palace occupied only by you? It might become depressing. That's why I created the Palace of Depression, back during the financial depression of nearly 100 years ago. It stands at the edge of Vineland, New Jersey, where it fell to ruin and is being rebuilt. My reconstructed monument to hope, my belief in not just tomorrow, but in next year and the next. When the doors again open, people will see that my palace is not merely tons of bricks and mortar or the echoes of swinging picks and shovels, but also an idea, the understanding that belief is what makes people strong, not disbelief, not despair. It's what permits you to look at a thing and think, I can make it better, or it's something that seems worthless and make it worthwhile. That's what the Palace of Depression is. The idea that if George Dehner built it, you can build a palace too, of words or of kindness or whatever you desire, which you can share with those seeking shelter before they build their own.
Another morning again, I'm alone.
I say I'm George Dehner. Well, George has been dead for decades, so let's say I'm who he was. Some insist I was really Charlie Dehner, a builder from Upper Darby, PA, but we'll go by what I say, starting with me joining the Klondike Gold Rush to Alaska in 1897, where with other hopefuls I endured the brutal frozen north. Unlike most of my fellow miners, I struck it rich. There was gold in them thar hills, and eventually in my hands. I, George Dehner, wasn't just a maintainer. I was always a gainer, never looking back at what I'd seen. Up ahead, that's what attracted me. So I took my Klondike gold, bought stocks, and got richer. I owned a mansion, a yacht, a chauffeur-driven motor car, and an Alaskan nugget big as my thumb hanging from my watch chain. But my most valuable possession was none of that. No one was saner than old George Dehner, plus I had something gold can't buy, imagination. And I had the strength of will to use it for the greater good of man and woman, and for myself, because why not? Sometimes what seems like a catastrophe can be a blessing. Hard as it may seem to fit the financial collapse of 1929 into that outlook, that's what it was for me. The stock market dropped and my fortune fell with it. Mansion, yacht, all of it gone. Except for that gold nugget on my watch chain. Selling it brought enough cash to buy a Model T truck and enough gasoline to drive down to rural South Jersey, where for $1 each I bought 7 acres of vine-choked Vineland real estate. Thorn bushes, poison ivy, sumac, and sand. There was no gold in them thar hills. There wasn't even hills. Being so often photographed as I was in the years to come, you must have seen me. Long dark hair, heavy beard, my eyes burning with determination, my hands half clenched as if about to mix the mortar for the bricks and stone I planned to lay, because I had a vision. A spirit came to me, an angel, if you will, and said, "George, I got a project for you. The people everywhere, they're down. They lost their money, their hopes and dreams, their livelihood, and dark days are upon them. This year's the Depression, George Dehner, and it's your job to bring folks up. Give them hope and entertainment, raise their minds from the depths of despair." It was like Noah receiving a voice from on high. Build an edifice, George, ornamented to catch the people's eye, of bricks and boulders and bottles and whatever you find along the road, what's done been thrown away. The unwanted stuff like the folks themselves, the stuff that's down. And this thing you'll build, this structure of masonry and trash, will give people what they need, more than money or handouts or the lies that get thrown at them every day. From the economic depression will come a palace of depression that will signify the opposite of its name. Nothing depressed about it or sorrowful or blue. No, yours will be a palace of the enduring human spirit, the spirit of things getting better, if we just give it time. So I listened and got busy, dug footings, trenches, mixed mortar with sand from my nearby stream, and started laying bricks. I let that precious possession of mine frolic out there in the Vineland woods, let it romp and have its way, my imagination, and thus the palace grew. 3 years I kept at it night and day without rest, without self-doubt, and often without much money. But I got her done, my palace, my fortress, my testament to what a man can do when he gets the call. On Christmas Day, 1932, my task was complete. The greatest piece of originality in the history of man, my Palace of Depression, opened its gate to the world, and the world came busting in for 25 cents per ticket. Didn't folks love to take my picture dressed like the man of mystery I was, in a top hat and tails, my beard brushed and perfumed? I led them on tours past spires and through a labyrinth of tunnels into the Devil's Dungeon and along catwalks up into the turrets looking out over the desolate forest where at night the howls of the Jersey Devil rang through the air. And the folks, they saw what I'd done was against the odds, against the prevailing times, against the depression of finance and spirit that had taken over, the poverty of mind that had latched hold. I showed it didn't have to be that way. All you had to do was say never to the great no that was oppressing everyone. And once you said it, get to work. And wasn't I proud? Those were good years through the Depression and into the Second War and on into the 1950s. But then, oh my, life was picking up by then. Good times were returning, and folks found new recreations. My palace stopped being a big draw. Tickets went unsold, which nothing I did could change. Truth is, I wasn't getting my picture took much anymore. I learned to accept that and the idea that people no longer needed my palace to give them hope. But it had been there when they needed it, and for that I was satisfied. Soon after, in 1964, I shuffled off this mortal coil. Some said at the age of 104. I had outlived almost all of Alaska's gold seekers, the fortune hunters, the winners and losers of the wild Klondike that is the great terrain of life. I nearly outlived the palace itself, because 2 years later its wooden structure burned down. Afterwards, the authorities leveled to the ground what remained. There it lay until 1998, when the late Kevin Kirchner, Vineland's building inspector, convinced the city not to sell the land for housing. With faded photographs and dusty memories, perseverance and donated dollars, plus the help of volunteers like artist Jeffrey Tarante, and later under the direction of Kevin's late son Christian, they reconstructed the walls, the tunnels, the dungeons, the very spirit of the palace, and the sense that what has fallen can rise. So the palace has risen, though work remains for the Restoration Society led by Steve Medio. Eventually the public will explore, delight, thrill to this resurrection of what I willed myself to do. People needed a lift, and I made it happen. There was a depression on the land, and in defiance, I built a palace. George Dehner's Palace of Depression, a palace of optimism and of hope.
Hello, folks. Well, thank you for being here today at this beautiful Levoy Theater. I can remember when I was a cashier here many years ago when I was 16. No longer 16, but I feel 16 at times. And it's just great that you could all attend. It's kind of fun to realize that over 60 years ago, I purchased the barn. It was a dream come true, and it belonged to the Ackleys and Edith Clun, and I saw it as an art school immediately. And from then on, you know, we started out having art shows. I remember the first one we had was 3 students out there. And it's been going on now over 60 years, and it continues because we have a lovely barn family and a lot of great teachers here. And my family, Carol, and grandchildren are going to keep it going. And all our teachers believe in it. And so it'll keep on going. Because some children come back and they tell us what they learned here, the nature walks. And it's just a great, I had no idea it was going to be like this, but it is wonderful.
As an artist, Pat Witt started early, painting in a barn, and she's still painting in one. Born in 1927, Pat grew up on a vegetable and dairy farm near Port Elizabeth, New Jersey. When she was little, she kept telling her grandfather she wanted to be an artist. One day he said, "Okay, Patsy, paint these stalls." They were cow stalls, about 30 of them. Pat made paint from what nature provided, such as pokeberries and walnut juice, and she painted hearts, flowers, rainbows. Her colors were the blue of the sky, the copper of her hair. Soon other farmers wanted their stalls painted, and Pat Witt, artist, was on her way.
There's a saying that show me some work you love, then you haven't worked a day in your life. I look at that beautiful place. I'm so fortunate. I've worked hard for that.
Pat's family farm was on the banks of the Morris River, and hers was a world of natural beauty. This beauty became linked with art in her mind. Her parents would say, "Patsy, come out and see this winged dinger of a sunset," or she would see in the wings of a butterfly patterns like those she had painted in the stalls. Nature filled her life, and she would place that life into her art.
It takes the nerves of steel. It takes perseverance. And no matter what the challenge of the morning, when you wake up in the morning, it's going to be your day. Don't think you're going to get there by selling your artwork, because you may not, and you have to have other jobs to support yourself, to support your love for the arts. Rusty. Now we're going to really look and see. Have you started drawing, Olivia, already? Good. All right, I want all of you to look over at your still life that you just created, and you're going to try to draw it the way you see it. So you can begin now, and we're not going to talk, are we? Listen to yourself draw.
The first summer that I studied at the Birchman's Farm in the landscape class, I was one of the only men that was in this class that summer. And so the Bertram twins would always have a chore for me to do and a can to open or a barrel to roll somewhere. And Pat used to offer my services to the Bertrams all the time. I would take care of something. But Pat called me Gary, and she continued calling me Gary for 2 years. And I was a little intimidated by the whole thing, so I said, I'll just be Gary. Well, one day, Pat was doing a demonstration of the sunset, and she always asked these rhetorical questions back to the group, and she said, so that's right, isn't it, Gary? And all the students looked around, and they said, Pat, who's Gary? And she pointed at me, and they said, that's Stan. She goes, well, he looks like Gary to me.
I've learned more from her over these past 12 years than I think I could have ever learned from just a book alone. She's like 35 books and, 20 movies, everything compiled into one. And she can just spit it back at you whenever you need it. Anything you ask her, she usually has an answer, or if it's not an answer, it's usually the Socratic method, which somehow makes you realize you already knew the answer. So that's the Pat Witt way.
In 1962, Pat approached her cousin, Edith Clunn, who owned a farm on the outskirts of Millville, and said she wanted to buy 2 acres. Why? Edith asked. Did Pat want to be a farmer? Well, not really. What Pat wanted was the barn. Her mother loaned her $1,000, and Pat went into the art business. But wait, there was more to it than that. Edith liked birds, and she would hear one singing and ask Pat what it was. Luckily, Pat often knew. That's a barn swallow, she might say. So, as Pat tells it, she acquired the barn by passing a bird test. Edith's barn became the barn, which soon became a school, an art school now celebrating its 56th anniversary.
Well, there's a lot of wannabes, but they don't want to work at it. I've seen it time and time again. And years ago in art school, the kids that had the most paint on their clothes were not artists. I just learned I taught somebody's great-grandmother. Can you believe it? I can. And it's such a happy place because this is where they can come and freely create and make mistakes. And as my great mentor, Morris Blackburn, taught us to dare to be lousy. That was his always telling us at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, dare to be lousy. And that released a lot of energy that you could keep on going without going for a grade or competing. And that helps in the long run for the big journey.
My sister and I founded a nonprofit New Jersey corporation 5 years ago so that we could perpetuate the Barn Studio of Art into the future. As Pat was getting to be around 80 and sort of looking at, what the future would hold for the barn, we got together and decided to incorporate as a New Jersey nonprofit. And from that point on, we started working on how to make that happen and really to start bringing in various teachers or students that had studied with Pat to sort of take over the teaching or work with Pat over a 5-year period to sort of get a foundation in place to keep the teachings of Pat Witt going for years to come.
You like it? Did you put your name there too?
If you were to ask me what I learned from Pat, I'd have to say that it's a given that Pat is a great teacher, and we all recognize that. And we certainly recognize her sensitive, unique vision in expressing the paintings of South Jersey, the light and the color in particular.
And I want you to touch and feel your hair gently with 2 hands. And how about your face and your clothes and your shoes, your footwear. Which is the most smooth feeling? What? Call it out.
Hair, your face.
Your face?
Clothes.
Huh? What? Did they say it right, Miss Tara?
They said face and hair.
Very good. See, that's what we call texture.
If you break the rule, you can mud the painting, because what'll happen is that like it kind of starts to smear into itself and become a bit of a mess. Is it fun to do that sometimes? Yes, of course it is, right? So like the rules are there, but they're rules of thumbs. The other rule of oil painting that really shouldn't be broken is light over dark, right? In watercolor, we put our light whites and things like that down first. In oil painting, we put all of our darks down first, right? So we want to first start out with all of the dark things and dark shadows and dark objects, and then we put the light stuff on top of that.
The barn grew both in size and influence. From a few students, Pat came to have many. They eventually would include a number of well-respected artists, too many to name here, some of whom are now teachers themselves, spreading what Pat calls the art spirit.
Because we were farm girls, most of our lives was spent along the Morris River here. If I wanted to come down and see the twins, Jeanette and Janice Burcham, I would get in a rowboat and row down here. It would only be about 3 miles on the highway to get here, but by boat, it was just rowing and much more fun coming over here by the boat. Fred, who's our custodian, found it in the trash. I want to see whose drawing it is. That's great. Does anybody know who did this? Anybody? That's yours, I know it.
Would you like me to out of my board?
It's a beautiful drawing. In fact, the adult class. Excuse me?
No, it's not.
But this is a great drawing. And Bill Tournay, who teaches adult class, saw it hanging up over here, and he said, "Who did this painting?" You know, he said it has a feeling of Picasso. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'll do it.
It's a great drawing. So children, I just want to tell you, don't throw your art away. I have portfolios full of artwork that I did when I was 18 years old in art school. And I used to think they were hideous too. But you know, when I get them out again, I think, that's not too bad. So you must always honor your own artwork, all right? Don't throw it away.
She has, over the years, really opened my eyes to the world. She teaches you not only to see the tree, but to see the cosmos in the tree, to see the cloud in a tree, the rain in a tree, and how everything is connected. And to take that connection and put it into your painting.
She is the energy of art, the spirit of art. She represents it. The whole barn has this energy in it of being the presence of art always there.
I discovered Pat Witt in 1997 when I was a student at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. There was a discussion going on in the next room about a very, very popular special teacher from the Millville area, and my ears perked up and I realized, have I been passing this person's house for the last 3 years coming to school and not knowing that I could have studied with somebody else? So this was before a lot of the internet. I went home and called information, got the number. When I called Pat Witt up, she answered and I said, "So you're alive?" And she said, you betcha I'm alive. And who's this? And it started our long history of somewhat prank phone calls we do to each other. We always have a wonderful way of greeting each other. But I said, I understand that you're a teacher and you give landscape painting classes. And she says, in fact, we have one starting tomorrow. So I met her at the Bertram's Farm the next day, and I studied with her for several years at Bertram's Farm. It's just amazing there.
Pat's students have been fortunate in having a teacher devoted not only to their work, but her own. She spent August of 1980 living in a shack on the marsh near Bradford Beach on Delaware Bay, walking along the creeks and ditches, swatting bugs and painting sunrises, moonrises, working with absolute concentration. Afterward, she'd prime her canvases for the next day. During that month, she painted about 500 pochades, small sketches. One evening, predicting a meteor shower, astronomers joined her. As they studied the heavens, star fragments raced across the sky, and a large pink cloud floated over the bay and flashed with lightning. Such history as this, a lifetime in art, Pat brings to her students.
It would flash lightning, and it would be pink. You would think of pink cotton candy. That's what I kept thinking about it. And it would, every now and then, a strike of lightning would happen, and it would be this big pink. So the whole night was a magical night. And then all of a sudden, out of the midnight blue, we counted anywhere from 60 to 70 meters an hour.
We're going to repeat after Miss Cara. When our mouths are open, if you would not. Our minds are closed. Our minds are closed. Okay, good. Chickens! Chickens or guinea hens?
The barn students head off on a nature walk, their path uncluttered. Their lives, though, will meet obstacles, as Pat's did early in school. She didn't want to add and subtract, but to paint and draw. The result, while other children sat in their classrooms, Pat stood out in the hall. This continued into high school. Punishment, hallways without nature, beauty, or butterflies. Just walls with one flat coat of paint.
Black Widow. Black Widow.
Then a sympathetic teacher placed Pat in home economics and industrial arts classes, and Pat became a good student. Pat never forgot that. Through art, she helps others help themselves. She also provides them with optimism. She says, I created a magic bubble around the barn, and I won't let negativity intrude. That might seem difficult, considering her latest obstacle. She's losing her sight. Macular degeneration began 10 years ago. This woman, who always met problems head-on, can now only see them from the side. Yet she still paints. Her paintings have become, expectedly, more impressionistic. She will not, she said, ever give up. Pat says, thank God for this day, and come what may. Whatever comes her way, she perseveres. In October of 2017, at the age of 90, she exhibited 20 new paintings at Millville's Riverfront Renaissance Center for the Arts, shortly after a fall resulting in 5 broken ribs. While preparing for the show, Pat worked 2 to 4 hours daily for a month, giving it all the energy she had. Because that's what Pat does. She gives all she is able to give. Unable to give her paintings detail, she gave them color. They are luminous. They glow, no less than does she.
We are so excited about tonight and this show and what it represents. New visions. Pat was pretty anxious about the show, and we just kept encouraging her. You just have to keep painting, and she did.
People are getting so, I notice this all the time, they're not contacted with the world.
it could be frightening.
10 years ago, the Barn Studio began a free community outreach program. Every Tuesday, sometimes more often, young children visit from Millville, Glassboro, Swedesboro, Williamstown, and Vineland. There, during a 2-hour workshop under the guidance of coordinator Sandy Smith, they are exposed to painting, classical music, and ballet.
When I began at the barn, we had 2 classes that would meet at the barn for the community outreach. And over the past 10 years, we've grown to having 700 children come through the barn doors to learn about Pat's philosophy of education.
Pat teaches directly, hands-on, but also by the Socratic method. She asks questions, and by the replies, her students learn more thoroughly than if she were to provide the answers. Each student is guided, not forced. How effective is the program? Look not only at the paintings, but at the faces of these children, their happiness and pride.
We get to draw with pencils, paint, and different colors with paint, and we get to mix all the colors up and they make different colors.
I like to be an artist because I paint good. I like art because there's no mistakes.
Mostly everybody in the world loves art, I think.
There have been generations of children who have come through here and are influencing as adults their children, their grandchildren, and it's just perpetuating this wonderful thing that Pat established all these years ago.
Many people told her that you have to leave this area to accomplish anything in life. And what I'm most proud of is that she looked around and saw what she could do here in the community.
The barn is really the only way that has continued to bring children into this long lineage of coming from Henry Henchy and Blackburn and a continuing line from the great masters. And that's what the students get here. Whether or not they become artists or not, if they become lawyers, they're still a part of the lineage.
It doesn't matter if they're going to become an artist. That's not the point. The point is that they learn about having self-esteem, self-confidence in their lives. It makes a complete different wonderment in their lives. Some are in science, they're in medical. There have been thousands of students studying here over the years, and it's based on non-competitive. I don't believe in competition for the arts, because it's not like football or baseball or soccer. It's for your self-building, your own self-learning.
Pat never accepted anything less than motivation in anyone, in any of her students. And a large part of what Pat was about, or is about, is that one can participate and be part of the wonderment and magic of life.
Everyone who's experienced Pat has a different story, but it all turns down to this idea that she contains and holds so much information and is able to wield you and give you self-confidence and build up your ego while teaching you so much information.
I'm very proud of my mother because I have watched through the years her be a visionary in this area.
All right. So, all right, each one of you now are going to make believe.
A child's mind is much more active and conscious when they are surrounded with and participating in art programs.
We had people approach us and tell us stories, take us aside and say, if it wasn't for the barn, I wouldn't be alive today. Art relates to everything in the world. It relates to religion, it relates to history, geography, everything, science. There isn't one thing that art doesn't relate to.
If you look at Pat Witt's hands, you will see they are strong and supple, the hands of a woman who makes things, and who has done so since her youth. She spent her life observing sunrises, sunsets, and interpreting them on canvas, in paintings where reds and violets light the sky, and also the green marsh. She has painted the same scene thousands of times. and each time seen it differently. And now, though many years have passed, for her the colors still glow. Her hands can still hold someone else's hand and help that person to see at the Barn Studio of Art.
And that is the magic of the barn. On behalf of Pat and our family and the Barn Studio of Art, we thank you for being here today, for celebrating her and her sheer passion and love and devotion to the arts, for the service that she gave to this local and continues to give to this local community and to the surrounding areas and to the world at large. We're thankful to have her in our lives, and all of us have been touched by her in one way or another, and by the spirit, the art spirit. And we ask you, as you go through memory lane, as you're watching, as you watched the film today, if you've studied with Pat, to think back to those classes. You heard Carol talk to you earlier about our vision for the barn. It thrives, it continues to carry on. And it only does that through this community and through all of you and the service that you give. So what we ask you to do is, if you studied with her and you studied at the barn, try to think back about who was in your class and help us to find those other alumni members that we've not yet contacted to bring back and to re-engage with the barn magic. Give us a hint. You don't have to know all the information about where those students are or where your old friends live, but just give us a clue and help us to locate them and bring them back into the fold. And as you heard earlier, we hear stories from all over the world. And these people have been touched, and we're so taken back about what they're doing to incorporate Pat's teachings today. And for generations to come, up to 5 generations who have studied here at the barn. So help us keep this spirit alive, the art spirit alive, and thank you for being here with us today. Thank you. I had 2 other things and I forgot. I'm sorry, I got a little emotional, or maybe 3. If you studied at the barn, you're an alumni member, and even if you haven't and you're here with us today and learning about the barn for the first time, please visit our website and be sure to sign up for our e-news to be informed about upcoming events. You won't be sorry that you did. The program for the alumni is in development, and so you'll see plenty of announcements coming up the pike. We also have a sale coming for Pat. All of her original artworks on Saturday, December 7th from 11 to 3, and you'll see a card like this at the table as you're leaving. And also, if you haven't purchased your books, you're going to want to do that as well. Think about that as you're approaching the holiday season. They are at a discounted price of $50 today, so they're at the front door as well. Again, thank you for coming. Have a wonderful rest of the day.